play it any louder, then it's getting shut down.
My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the last 24 hours in the news. Today is September 26, 2025. It is 10:50 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Here are the top U.S. news highlights for the past 24 hours. Supreme Court allowed the Trump administration to freeze nearly $4 billion in foreign aid. The court paused a lower court order that would have required funds to be spent by the end of the fiscal year, clearing the way for the administration to withhold that aid while litigation continues. A decision critics say expands executive control over congressionally appropriated spending. Federal judge in Arizona blocked deportations of dozens of unaccompanied Guatemalan and Honduran children. A preliminary injunction protects about 69 children from immediate removal while courts consider claims about due process and coordination with foreign governments. The administration had been attempting rapid deportations. New criminal filings and prosecutorial maneuvers tied to the Trump administration's broader campaign of legal retaliation are active. In the last 24 hours, there are reports of a new indictment brought in a federal grand jury against former FBI Director James Comey, and public statements by President Trump encouraging prosecutions of political opponents. A notable escalation in politicized legal threats. Domestic deployments and guard activations tied to immigration and crime operations remain active and expanding over recent days and referenced in reporting today. DoD/National Guard activations and planning have supported large immigration enforcement and logistics missions across multiple states. Earlier orders directed Guard units to be available for suppressing unrest and supporting operations in several cities. These mobilizations continue to raise civil rights and civil-military separation concerns. No verified reports for the past 24 hours of active use of federal military forces firing on or directly engaging U.S. civilians. Executive power moves that could affect citizen well-being. The Supreme Court order permitting the freeze of billions in foreign aid sets an important precedent for executive withholding of appropriated funds. Critics warn it may be extended to other spending domains and weaken Congress's appropriations power. Immigration enforcement expansions remain a top federal policy priority with operational impacts. The administration's expanded deployments, rapid deportation efforts, now checked by the courts in some instances, and coordination with state guard forces increase the chance of abrupt enforcement actions that can disrupt communities and provoke confrontations. The Arizona injunction is a concrete countermeasure from the judiciary. No single nationwide infrastructure failure reported in the past 24 hours, but ongoing policy choices such as troop and guard mobilizations and reallocation of federal resources could strain local logistics and emergency response in cities where federal assets are retasked. Watch local supply chain and transit reporting in municipalities where guard elements are operating. Respiratory virus picture. The CDC surveillance and recent public reporting show elevated hospitalizations from respiratory viruses in recent seasons and a cautious outlook heading into the 2025-2026 respiratory season. Health agencies continue to warn of potential increased COVID-19 hospitalization peaks and note the severe 2024-25 flu impact on children. Locally, watch hospital capacity and regional CDC MMWR updates for near real-time strain on health systems. Freeze of $4 billion of foreign aid will have diplomatic fallout. The Supreme Court decision allowing the Trump administration to hold those funds affects U.S. diplomacy, UN peacekeeping, democracy, and humanitarian assistance, and will likely prompt partner countries and aid groups to protest or seek separate remedies. That funding cut could raise geopolitical and humanitarian risks in nations dependent on that assistance. Immediate Supreme Court decision favors administration on foreign aid freeze. This is the most consequential federal judiciary development in the last 24 hours that directly benefits the administration. Parallel litigation and prosecutions reporting in the last 24 hours shows active litigation both challenging the administration's actions, e.g. immigration and deportation injunctions, and separately prosecutorial filings that are part of the administration's stated campaign targeting political opponents. These dynamics mean litigation will remain high volume on multiple fronts: defensive suits against federal policy and offensive criminal filings. What to watch next? Appeals and additional Supreme Court activity in expansion of the Foreign Aid Ruling Act or ruling or related emergency orders could reshape checks and balances. Federal Guard and troop tasking notices. Watch DOD and state governor releases for new Title 32 or Title 10 activations and specific ROE rules of engagement. Local court orders on deportation and detention cases, injunctions like the Arizona order, may be replicated elsewhere. Public Health Weekly MMWR and regional hospital capacity reports for signs of stress from respiratory season. And stock markets closed today with the S&P 500 up about 0.6% on Friday, breaking a 3-day losing streak. Dow Jones gained 299 points, up 0.7% on Friday, and the Nasdaq rose 0.4% on Friday. Here are the top trade and economic highlights for the past 24 hours. Economic growth and GDP. The U.S. economy's second quarter growth was sharply changed by 0.5%. It was revised upward to 3.8% annualized, up from the prior estimate of 3.3%. You know, Trump has to like the numbers. The revision was driven by stronger consumer spending and a moderation of imports, among other factors. That's according to Reuters. Still, analysts caution that much of this gain is being pulled forward, front-loaded consumption and inventory effects, and the second half of 2025 may slow significantly under the weight of tariffs, policy uncertainty, and softer demand. S&P Global's flash PMI September suggests business activity is decelerating. The composite PMI fell from 54.6 to 53.6, indicating expansion, but at a weaker pace. Selling price inflation cooled, though cost pressures remain. The OECD warns that the full economic burden of U.S. import tariffs has yet to be felt. Many firms are currently absorbing the hit via narrower margins and inventory buffers over time. The drag on growth, investment, and trade will likely intensify. According to a CFO survey from Richmond Fed, business leaders reported rising optimism in quarter three. I'm sure that's specific business people. I wouldn't assume that it would be most or all business people feeling that way. I'm sure if you're manipulating the markets, that you have rising optimism right now. Other than that, I don't see how anybody could have rising optimism right now. Though trade policy tariffs remain their top concern. Trade, tariffs, and deficit dynamics in a striking policy move. Donald Trump announced new tariffs targeting imported pharmaceuticals. He's trying to make it so nobody can get medication while we're rolling into flu season. Heavy trucks and furniture, including a 100% duty on branded drugs not made domestically. If you're sick and you need medication for any freaking reason, I'm seeing this personally as a screw you from Donald Trump. And 25% on heavy-duty trucks, among others. The tariffs are slated to begin October 1st. I just see it as a move that does deliberate harm to the American people. There's better ways to plan things than just slamming down tariffs with no plan of how you're going to deal with the supply chain disruptions. Is just, to me, an act of aggression. These fresh tariff measures immediately roiled markets and raised concerns about supply chain disruptions and inflationary spillovers in the coming months. The timing of these new tariffs is especially consequential given ongoing global volatility and trade frictions. Markets are now assessing the risk of broader escalation with key trading partners. On the structural side, U.S. trade deficits remain a concern. The U.S. current account deficit narrowed somewhat in quarter 2, 2025 to $251.3 billion, though this reflects swings in trade and flows and should be interpreted cautiously amid shifting tariff regimes. Consumer spending in August, latest month with available data, grew by 0.6%, continuing a string of solid month-to-month gains. That strength in consumption helped prop up inflation readings, with the Fed's preferred measure, PCE, registering at 2.7% year over year. The resilience in consumer spending provides some cushion against downside risks, though household budgets remain under pressure from inflation, higher borrowing costs, and tariff-induced price increases. Growth forecasts for 2025 remain under downward pressure. S&P Global sees below trend growth persisting through quarter 4 2025 as policy uncertainty and external headwinds weigh. The OECD's interim outlook expects U.S. growth to slow 1.8% in 2025 from 2.8% in 2024 and further to 1.5% in 2026, citing tariff drag, slower investments, and declining immigration flows. One wild card is how businesses unwind excess inventories built ahead of tariff deadlines. As buffers deplete, the real trade and demand impacts may become more visible in coming quarters. Another risk, inflationary pressures could rebound if tariffs are passed on or if supply chains remain stressed, making it harder for the Fed to ease aggressively. And remember, kids, the stock market is not the economy. Just because the S&P 500 or Dow Jones might be performing does not mean that wages are growing, jobs are secure, inflation is under control, or that people are thriving. And here is the upcoming hazardous weather outlook for the United States for the next few days, next 3 days. Central and southern plains and Midwest, a frontal boundary is associated low pressure system are expected to trigger scattered thunderstorms across sections of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and neighboring states. Some storms may produce damaging wind gusts, large hail, and locally heavy rainfall. The risk is highest during late afternoons and evenings as daytime heating peaks. Mississippi, Ohio, and Tennessee Valley's thunderstorm activity is likely to extend eastward into parts of the Mississippi, Ohio, and Tennessee valleys. While the storms won't be uniformly severe everywhere, some localized flooding and strong winds are possible, especially in zones where storms cluster or persist. Rocky Mountain, Intermountain West, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona expect daily chances of thunderstorms and higher terrain in mountain zones. These storms could bring brief downpours, gusty winds, and localized flash flooding, especially over steep terrain and burnt scars as air mass moderates later in the period. Storm coverage may wane. Afternoon to evening storms will remain a possibility across parts of the southeast and Gulf Coast. Most storms will be ordinary, but heavier downpours and gusts could affect isolated areas. Coastal zones international cooperation and pushing for greener growth paths. Hurricane Humberto intensifies, heading toward Bermuda. Humberto has strengthened to a Category 1 storm in the Atlantic, moving northeast toward Bermuda. Forecasts suggest it could become a major hurricane later today or tomorrow. Monitoring is ongoing. Global markets shaken by Donald Trump's dumbass tariffs, especially in pharma and furniture sectors. Following the announcement of sweeping new U.S. tariffs 100% on branded drugs, 25% on heavy trucks, etc., markets in Asia and Europe dipped. Investor attention is turning to how the new levies might affect global supply chains and future Fed policy. U.S. Fed faces more complexity after strong growth and fresh tariffs. The upward revision of U.S. quarter 2 GDP to 3.8%, which is probably a falsified number because it was 3.3%, along with the new tariffs, has complicated the Federal Reserve's path. If he would stop introducing tariffs, the Fed would be able to start easing. Just so you know. Rate cuts that had been widely anticipated may now be rethought. Trump orders release of all U.S. government documents related to Amelia Earhart. In a surprising move, President Trump has attempted to distract America away from the Epstein files by attempting to declassify and release all records concerning Amelia Earhart's disappearance. He linked the effort to public interest as scrutiny grows over the withheld records. Epstein. And this concludes the news for today. Everybody stay safe out there.